This is Lecture 10. We call it Civilizations. Early civilizations arose in a number of places, most of them river valley civilizations. In China, along the Yellow River, the Harappan society in today what we'd call India and Pakistan, along the Indus River. And then, of course, in Mesopotamia with Sumer. This, of course, is the land between the rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, and what today we call Iraq. And then, of course, in Egypt, in the Nile River Valley. And then you have the Olmec Society in Central America, not located on a river. Now, what about nomadic societies? They should be included in a World History Survey, even though nomadic people don't live in cities. We tend to concentrate on civilizations, that is, people who live together in large groups in cities. And quite often this allows us to leave out whole groups of people, nomadic people. So we're going to try to include them here. Remember that using civilizations as a unit of analysis kind of runs counter to the world history search for larger patterns and contact among these civilizations. So let's characterize civilization for a moment. We talked about the Neolithic Revolution last time, the rise of farming, the production of a surplus of food, of settled societies, of larger populations, of the emergence of a variety of specialists, the emergence of political institutions, the emergence of a bureaucracy. Now, you guys have heard this word all your life, and you've encountered bureaucrats countless times. Think about it when you go to the Department of Motor Vehicles to get your tag or what have you. You're dealing with a bureaucrat, right? A clerk across the desk from you. Think about bureaucracy in a theoretical way. It is the projection of a centralized power. When you go get your tag, you don't talk to the governor, right? And you don't talk to the President of the United States. You talk to some clerk across the desk who embodies the power of the state. So a bureaucracy, as it extends through a nation or a kingdom, projects the power of the leadership. We'll see this throughout these ancient civilizations. Of course, you have the rise of religious leaders. Priests tend to accrue power by virtue of their ability to divine the heavens and the wishes of the gods. We have increased inequality, that is, we have a hierarchy of classes. We have laws, we have discrimination, and these laws and discrimination often promote these distinct classes and hierarchies. Let's go further with some of these early civilizations. Egypt and Mesopotamia are in close proximity to each other, but they're quite different civilizations. Egypt is protected by its geography. Think about Egypt protected in the north by the Mediterranean Sea, in the east by the Red Sea and desert, in the south and in the west by desert. So Egypt has geographical buffers to protect it. Sumer in Mesopotamia, of course, does not. It's on a wide open plain between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers and open to invasion. Moving further east to the Indus River Valley, we have the Harappan civilization. It's still somewhat shrouded in mystery because we have not interpreted their writing system. Harappan civilization also disappeared for reasons that are unknown. Chinese River Valley civilizations emphasized the ruler and the state very early on, an extension of that bureaucracy that I was just talking about. And of course, Chinese agriculture is key here. The rice yields are much greater in China than the grain yields of Southwest Asia. And of course, cultivating rice requires a lot more work as well. Think about the institutions that are going to be created and that can be copied and spread from these ancient civilizations. Things like money, currency, literacy, the states themselves, state organization, military institutions, and of course, organized religions. All these spread from these civilizational centers to the hinterlands, to the frontiers beyond. In the metaphor used by the McNeils, cities served as crossroad and storehouses for information, goods, and infections. We have cooperation and competition. These things tend to drive specialization with innovation and improvement. Human groups tend to get bigger, from families to clans to tribes to chieftains to states. And of course, we create distinct groups within these larger populations, like armies or monasteries, for instance. So the general trend of history has been towards greater and greater social cooperation. And occasionally you see a reaction against this globalization. You saw it in Nazi Germany in the 30s. You saw it with Imperial Japan. You saw it with the Soviet Union. Even our most recent election here in the United States, the Trump election, is largely a reaction against globalization. Nevertheless, it's kind of like standing in front of a tidal wave. The general trend of human history is toward greater and greater human cooperation, regardless of these momentary political anomalies. Metropolitan networks, or webs, to use the McNeil metaphor again, they expand due to improvements in communication and technology. Let me talk about early religion here just for a moment. It's a central part of civilization. In Egypt, the divine households pastured sheep. This supplied goods for the temple warehouses. This created in time a luxurious style of life for the resident god of the temple and the priest who looked after him. We see something similar to this in Sumer in Mesopotamia with the temples, the ziggurats they're called. You've seen images of these. You can Google the Tower of Babel and you'll see images of what we would think of as Sumerian ziggurats. The ritual splendor is the driving force behind rapid elaboration of skills that raised Sumerian cities to great heights. So these temple complexes encourage trade, create hierarchy, allow for large-scale cooperation, or cooperation may not be the word, large-scale coercion of labor to promote and sustain these luxurious lifestyles. In Sumer, these wealthy divine households could afford to support specialized craftsmen to create magnificent consumer goods. In Sumer and Egypt, a workforce of laborers worked under the priest's direction. They tended the flocks, they maintained dikes and canals, they cultivated the grain fields, they brought in the harvest. Sources of the priest's power? Well, an angry God is dangerous. So placating divine wrath daily required effort and special skill to interpret the god's intentions and state of mind. Omens could be read from the livers of sacrificed animals. Careful recording of the movements of the sun, the moon, the planets revealed divine intentions. Priests assured the state and the people of supernatural protection. Priestly temples, were centers of commerce and exchange. Priestly sanction for the ruler's legitimacy, and we've seen this throughout history, where the state looks to the church to legitimize the state's power. Some conclusions here. We talked about writing and literacy earlier. I just want to mention that in Sumer we have a cuneiform, and in Egypt, of course, we have hieroglyphic writing. A brief word here about a military revolution that's taking place. And we see this sort of a pendulum swinging back and forth through time. Chariots came to dominate by about 1700 BCE in Southwest Asia. And then foot soldiers, equipped with comparatively cheap iron armor and weapons, overthrew this chariot revolution about 1200 BCE. By the 7th century before the Common Era, we had cavalry archers, and this trend will continue on into the Middle Ages. We'll talk about the Mongols later, and you'll see this. These steppe raiders, the steppe is the short pasture land that runs across the center of Eurasia. These steppe raiders would later introduce an irregular political cycle in Eurasian history, where the steppe raiders come out of Central Asia, attack China, India, Persia, Mesopotamia, Europe, nomadic peoples, sort of scavenging on the old established civilizations. This is a rhythm that we'll pick up on as we move forward. Think about the three fundamental innovations that are going to be created here. Bureaucratic government that I've talked about at some length, alphabetic writing, and portable religions, that is, religions that can be moved about, taken from place to place, just as Christianity was taken from Europe to the New World, beginning with Columbus. So we'll stop there. Thank you for your attention.